There we go. Thank you, Wendy.
To do it on informal discussion or not. I'm okay either way.
Say that again, Jim?
Isn't it sometimes a question of whether to do it during an informal discussion? I'm okay either way, but sometimes they're recorded, sometimes they're not, or where's our policy?
Yeah, I think we typically, generally speaking, try to record. So I'll because we post them to our website after. So as long as everyone's okay with it, I think we can do the recording.
All right, back to your earlier.
Yes.
Something good.
I know. I'm trying to think.
I made it to DC. When I travel, if I make it to the right city on the right day, I call it a travel win. And although all was not smooth, I made it to the right city on the right day, and I am sitting in a conference room at 12th and H in DC. So that's my something good.
Yay. Good. Thanks, Wendy. Traveling, I'm really scarred from traveling for COP, so that is a big win anytime you can get anywhere. Hi, Jen. Of course, you joined just as I was saying that.
Yes, of course.
It looks like we have an informal discussion today, and our facilitator isn't here, so we're just sharing good things that happened this week. Does anyone else have a thought? I'm still trying to think.
I do. NCSE is releasing their climate change curriculum today, so that's my good thing. It's 5 lesson sets. They're all based around misconceptions. It can be used as a one and done high school curriculum, or it can be used as like piecemeal in order for teachers to identify specific misconceptions that their students have and then tackle those misconceptions. We're going to be presenting it next week, I think, right, Gina? So
yes,
we'll have more to say next week. But yeah, today is the big release day. So at some point today, the website will get updated and everything will go live.
That's so exciting. Congratulations, Kari. Can you share the website and like any information in the chat so we can check it out?
Absolutely. And I just looked at it, and some of the lesson sets are the old lesson sets, but they are going live today is my understanding. And lesson set 1 has been updated, so you can check that one out. I'll put the link in the chat.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're excited for the presentation next week. I hope it's well attended. We've been trying to promote these calls a little bit more since we have really cool presenters every other week, and it's kind of a shame that more people don't see them, although they get posted on our website. So I have what seems like a small win, but as you all know, Clean has our collection of over 800 peer-reviewed resources, and in order to get those, there is a lengthy, complicated review process that we go through. And I had to lead a training last week to train new reviewers, and I had just done the training myself, so I was a little overwhelmed by that, but I did it, and it felt like it went pretty well. And I just feel like I learned a lot, kind of forcing myself to do that because I don't really like public speaking. So yeah, it was good. It felt good.
I've got, oh, go ahead, Jim. I've got a couple. So I've got a 3rd round interview for a full-time naturalist position in a local city. So I've been, as a lot of you know, I've been working part-time for an organization called CRS. And I hope to keep that going too, because it's part-time kind of consulting, and it's a great organization. So this would be doing a lot of the stuff that I was doing at the old Science Center. So field trips, outreach, summer camps, program development. They have a big outdoor space, so there's a lot of gardening opportunities. And then I just threw my hat in the ring for, some of you might know, Project Drawdown has a story coordinator of storytelling. It's a half-time position. So I just got an application in for that too, because it sounded really interesting and kind of related to some of the stuff that we've been talking about here and I've been wanting to pursue in terms of uplifting stories from, diverse communities around the world. Their drawdowns mostly focused on local, like national stuff, but anyway, excited about some things seem to be opening up. So it's great.
That's super exciting. Congratulations on that. Jen,
That's
I see-
awesome, Eric.
Yeah. So you have your
Thanks,
hand
all.
up, Jen.
Sure. So let's see, I'll do one that is both in the form of announcements and I consider them to be good things that are happening. So this week, let's see, more on the West Coast side, public events, community events are absolutely roaring back. I mean, it's gone from we don't know when we're going to have them to where almost all the big ones are coming back. I'm talking in this case, ones that are in the range of 1,000 to 40,000 people attending. They're coming back. We've got 16 invitations to choose from on things, and we'll do some and some we can't. But just on the sense of, I mean, these events, you're reaching students at 1,000 schools in a day, 1,000 teachers from all over the place. So always want to make sure that Clean is represented there, and that a lot of times there's been this kind of big gulf between formal education, K-12, and what happens out in the communities. And the community doesn't see it as a gulf there. You just get them twice. The other one is more on the East Coast side in Maryland. The largest school district in the state is having its Youth Climate Summit this Saturday. And there's a lot of activity for students. Many of them are working with us. We're so excited to work with others, but it's going to be quite a rich Youth Climate Summit. It's their first. That's Montgomery County. And on April 5th and 6th, the last one I'll give you is that that same county, Montgomery County, and the Capital Region are having a energy summit. So this is a gathering of professionals and corporations and government around energy, like energy conservation, energy efficiency, buildings, lots of professionals. We're assuring that students are there doing their action projects, working with like the Smithsonian, the Capitol. And so I'll say it's also a thing of working to be serious about equity, inclusion, and diversity. I'm looking at the exhibitors at this, and I know well the energy sector. It's 85% white in communities where the population is 40% white. And that's something too, our students are changing. The majority of our presenters, and there's 8 of them, are women of color. So young women of color. So that's another thing having to go on, students relating to professionals. So that's what I have to bring in. Thank you.
Nice, thank you. Lots of good stuff happening. Frank, you have your hand up. Oh, sorry, Jen. You're on deck, Jen.
Okay. Well, I think it was in fall of this year. Yeah, it was in fall of this year. Our university president gave his convocation speech, which totally floored me because he spent nearly 20 minutes of that, 15 to 20 minutes of that speech talking about trying to position Portland State to deal with climate issues and trying to get the university to become a leader in that. And in the meantime, I've sort of searched around to try to figure out if anything ever became of that, and actually found out that there is a university climate initiative that, among other things, will be doing a symposium this spring. And so I reached out to that committee, basically saying, hey, I'd like to be able to showcase some student work at the symposium. Plus, I'd love to be able to find out how to plug in. And so the exciting thing for me was that finally, after all of this waiting, found out that yes, there is in fact something tangible happening at the university in the wake of the president's comments.
Good news, Frank.
Thanks for sharing. Jen, do you want to hop in?
Sure, I'll share a couple things. One is we are in the next day or two going to be rolling out our summer institute, which is going back to being in person. Yay! So we're going to be doing a 4-day residential educator retreat in the Adirondacks, which we're super psyched about, focusing on New York State teachers, specifically around rural teachers. Like we're currently, I think most of you know, but we have a NOAA grant right now, and that is focused on the rural issues and in climate resilience and rural teachers. I mean, not that we won't, of course, we want everybody, but we are going to have a strong focus in that. And we're also doing some new partnering with local watershed institutes, which I'm excited about, this intersection between climate and water. And so we're really looking forward to that. So that will get going to go live in the next couple of days. And then we'll also be doing a youth leadership retreat this summer, also in person, also in the Adirondacks. So once those are ready to be advertised, of course, I'll put them out on the Clean Network. The other thing I just wanted to just flag as a resource, a kind of an interesting resource, is that next week, I think you might remember maybe a month or so ago, I reached out to the Clean Network for resources on climate change and was like inundated with responses. It was so awesome. Like, I was like, oh my God, Clean to the rescue. The Clean community just, so I'm still working on pulling that together, and I am going to share that out. But one of the things that we're doing next week is working with an organization called the International Coalition for Sites of Conscience. And I'll put the link in the chat. They're an organization that works around the world, helping to promote dialogic interpretation. So how do you create dialogue with visitors and guests? And it's really like they work with museums and museums of all kinds, historic sites, parks, anywhere where you have visitors gathering. So we're going to be really focused on our new climate solutions exhibit and doing work around climate justice and climate solutions, and how to help support staff have the tools, methods, and the confidence to have hard conversations with folks. So I'm excited about that. So just sharing, just like good news happening all around. And we're hopefully also really close to hiring a new climate manager, which will make my life so much better and be good for our program. So all good things. I'll share that link for that organization in the chat. They work globally. They're really worth checking out. I've done workshops with them before. They're incredible, and they tackle really challenging issues and big themes around justice and equity. They work with sites that do work in genocide in all over the world. They work on immigration, policing, on all different all the equity issues that you can think about. Like, they work on those issues in different sites around the world, helping to support conversations and dialogue that deepen relationships and help promote understanding, empathy, and compassion.
That's super exciting. And Jen, you just reminded me of something else. You had started the conversation about climate change resources, but in another call, you also started a conversation about quantifying reduced carbon emissions from educational activities. So, and Frank had a really great speaker in mind for that. And we actually have booked him for April 5th. Eugene Cordero, if anyone knows him, he's going to be talking about the role of climate change education on individual lifetime carbon emissions, and he has he's published a few papers about that. So if anyone is still interested in that topic, I just thought that was kind of an exciting presentation that we're going to be having on this call, and really relevant for a lot of education folks. So I just wanted to say that, but very cool. Everyone has awesome stuff going on. And Melissa, I don't know if you wanted to share too. You're the last person.
Yeah, hi everybody. I work at UCAR Center for Science Education. Gosh, we're really busy right now. We have a bunch of projects that are like approaching their end. So we're at that place where you're trying to wrap up the odds and ends of a bunch of different projects. So for me personally, that feels great because it's nice to finish things and move on to the next things. But in terms of things that this group might be interested in, I know I haven't been super involved with it myself, but my other colleagues at SciEd are working on a panel for the Worldwide Climate Teach-In Day on March 30th. And I don't have a link to any details yet, but I'm sure one of us will share like next week or the week after. But I don't know if anyone else is working on things for the climate teach-in on March 30th, but I know that UCAR is going to be hosting a live streamed panel that day. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because Colleen is actually, I think we're going to do a webinar around the teach-in for teachers. So that would be, it's good that someone else is doing work on that. And maybe we can, I don't know, chat about that some more.
Yeah, it would be good to have links to other things going on. Or, you know, I know we'll have a website that like there'll be a link to join the panel and stuff like that. So yeah, it'd be good to know what other people have going on so we could make sure people can check out multiple things.
Yeah, I had not heard of that at all. You're not alone, Jen. There's just so much happening.
Yeah.
The fact that UCAR and Clean both intend to do something is wonderful. And the more notice we could have about what you're doing that we could share in advance, because we hear that all the time when we're sharing about other opportunities. Often we're hearing it on social and we're sharing it, but it's not enough time for anyone to have planned to participate. So we're definitely not going to pick up something and do it that day. In fact, I have a grant related review that day, so I will not be doing something. But I would love to amplify what you're doing.
I know we're going to have the panel, we're going to do the panel twice. Like it's going to be once at 11 a.m. and then at 6 p.m. And I think it's just a repeat of the same panel both times. But just to like catch, you know, people maybe after work and think, you know, after school and like a wider audience. And ours will be directed just at the public, the general public. Yeah.
Great. I'm glad that came up because I don't know how many of you know Jessica Bean, but Clean hadn't heard about it either, and she kind of pitched the idea to us of doing something collaborative on that day, and it sounds really cool. So, and I know the link is in the chat now, but yeah, there's tons of stuff going on. So. Hard to keep track of it all. And I have been saying this every week, but speaking of a lot of things going on, Clean is in the middle of their semester long webinar series. So we just are continuing to try to promote those, and feel free to attend if you see fit. I'll put the link in the chat, but we're moving right along on that and always trying to promote. Hey, Ginger. We just have an informal discussion today. Does anyone have any topics that they want to bring up?
I was on a public health call earlier that was interesting about environmental, oh gosh, what's it even called? But I still have the agenda open. Advancing environmental health equity through implementation science. And it was interesting listening to the sessions because they were talking about public health and climate impacts in the session I was in, and the education part of it was interesting. So I'm still worried about those silos that I see everybody in.
Totally. I think the whole public health and climate change conversation is super interesting. When I was in grad school, I interned for an organization. It was a consortium of health societies like APHA and American Cancer Society, stuff like that. And they all had doctors speaking about climate change and trying to promote those conversations with their patients. It was through the George Mason's Center for Climate Change Communication, because they have a lot of research talking about how doctors are a trusted source of information, and that's a really good entry point for just talking about climate change and having it come from someone that people trust, of course. So I think it's a really important discussion to even be talking about unsiloing, education and health, and there's just so many health impacts of climate. Yeah. Jen.
I was just trying to find, there's some really good stuff coming through Yale about the connections on public health, and I'll try to find it in a moment, but they have some research that they have, I think, a new certificate on public health and climate change, which I thought was really interesting. And then they also have some articles that have come through their like climate, the climate connections, which I'm sure many of you are subscribed to, around public health being that like one of the primary motivators to get people talking and thinking about climate change. So we were doing some research on that for our solutions exhibit, that health, that sort of personal health thing is a primary driver for people making behavior changes. So it's just an interesting thing, and I'm glad you some of you are bringing it up, and Gina, you were talking about it. I'll see if I can find the article that I was thinking about that sort of make some of that research references, but it's super, I find it really helpful to think about. And I think I never really see it in curriculum, or I haven't really seen it in a lot of curriculum around climate change for like middle or high school. And it seems to get, as I think somebody, maybe Wendy said, really siloed into like its own space. So you don't really hear about it in a way that is more integrated and sort of systems approach. So anyway, I'll see if I can find the article and I'll drop it in.
Yeah, I put the link in the chat to the agenda, and you guys can all just see. Obviously, they're recording it, so it's something that if it piques your interest, you could try and go back. The session that they're in right now is like research stuff, so it's way beyond me. but yeah, it's super interesting. One of the ladies was talking about in New York City, like how people are adapting, and they brought up adaptation, and they showed during a heat wave, like family in their car using the air conditioning because of the heat, and it's just like, wow, you want to talk about maladaptation? There's a good one. But at the same time, if it's too hot and your children are exhausted and can't sleep, and then they were talking about mental health connections, and mental health hospitalizations during heat waves, which I had heard of respiratory and pulmonary issues, but I had not heard of mental health issues. So I think these are things that we definitely, like looking at curriculum where I've seen in curriculum, like it talks about disease vectors and disease spread. So that public health angle, but I haven't really seen anything in the curriculum I've looked at that talks about other public health stuff.
Jim, I see your hand raised too.
Yeah, So absolutely agreeing on the health and climate change coming together. I don't know too much on things in K-12 schools per se, but definitely can say that the link between climate change and health is, I mean, there's just the amount of grassroots and top-down activity that's going on is quite amazing. I mean, there's, well, I mean, a couple of things. Over the last year, there have been so many organizations that have come and been bringing them together, mostly from the health perspective, toward climate change. Twitter, of course, is a mixed bag for most of us in some ways, but one of the places I think it does excel is it's a great way to find out what other organizations there are out there around the world. I mean, you sort of put yourself out in a certain area and you start getting back and you start looking. I mean, there are so many organizations on climate and health, and they have been reaching out to us. I'm sure they're reaching out to many of you too, of saying we want to work together. You know, this is important that we come together. Mobile Climate Science Labs has worked for a few years with the National Institute of Health. We're part of a health and building roundtable that looks at health and buildings, but has larger questions. So that's an area where the federal government has been very positive on climate change for quite some time. And so backing that up, I don't want to take away from this discussion. I don't want to shut it down. I don't want to divert for it. But if there is time for a second one later, I'm not saying we start now. I want to pose a question to Carrie because it's the question of would this be interesting? It's going to be so cool that you're going to be talking about NCSE material next week. And I think you're going to do it from the curriculum standpoint. If there's other things that we can do before or after beyond that's such a rich topic, I'd be loving to hear it. I mean, for instance, I'd love to hear more as you're dealing with misinformation and disinformation that go in the schools and everyone portraying them. What are various sources that you all are looking at? Like who, you know, I mean, because there's so many sources of misinformation, disinformation, manipulating the science and so on. You know, we can't, none of us tend to take them all on. We pick some and others take others to see what you're doing. Anyway, it's a question, some point, whether today or in the next couple of weeks, definitely want to hear more than just, the broader thing in the curriculum. So again, not trying to distract from health and climate change.
I'll say really briefly that we are going to go into that next week. We're going to talk about the different misconceptions and where we are gathering the data for those misconceptions and how we know that they're misconceptions in the classroom.
Right. What maybe one with it is, I mean, from our perspective, it's not necessarily we're going to do with the kids, but the misinformation and disinformation comes out in different ways from different sources. And it's important, I think it's important if we are doing anything about that, if we're not just accepting it, to know how those organizations do different things, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions we have of what their messages are. So, I mean, there's specific corporations that do very different things than the Heartland Institute. I mean, they're kind of on the same side in a lot of ways, but the way they go about it is much more nuanced and everything. And just that, so it's a little, I don't know if there's time for covering all that.
So if I'm hearing you right, the question you're asking is, how do we, NCSE, know what all these organizations are doing and how they're spreading their misinformation, and how are we teaching the kids about identifying that misinformation and teaching them how to identify that it's misinformation in the first place? Yeah,
and I think there's the sophistication of knowing there's this type of misinformation, there's this type of way, and it can look different than this type of way and this type of way, because there's a lot of opposition to what we do, and it takes many different forms. I don't want to go into analogies of like warfare or something, because warfare is awfully dreadful right now. But the thing of like, if you're not, you can guard against this, but you also have to know how to guard against this. So, thanks.
We will talk about that next week, I promise.
Great. Okay.
I learned something tangentially related to the climate change and health thing. I was speaking with some people that work with work at the EPA in air quality this week, and they were saying that because of COVID, a lot of schools are investing in CO2 monitors inside their buildings as a way to measure airflow, right? More for like thinking about, are we getting enough fresh air? How likely is it that we're going to transmit viruses and things like that? But they were saying that there's like this kind of like, of course, CO2 is always kind of like the like hot button gas, but there's even like this kind of renewed interest in schools and stuff for like installing CO2 monitors and getting equipment and things like that. And I just was thinking, I know maybe the impetus for that is a different health reason, but it might be an opportunity to like bring some other like health and climate connections now that we've got people like with these CO2 monitors and teaching kids about them. And I don't know, just kind of an interesting thing. I didn't realize that monitoring CO2 levels in your building was being implemented as a way to gauge like airflow safety in school buildings.
Hop in, Eric.
Yeah, related to that, Melissa, I'd heard the same thing, about the CO2 monitoring, just because, like you say, the ppms go way up when the air is stagnant inside. We had CO2 monitors as part of a grant project up at Chabot, 10 or 15 years ago. And it was for the idea to just get folks getting used to monitoring something that we can't see in a very, very small quantities of the atmosphere. And then we would do the indoor and outdoor thing just to sort of show that, CO2 can kind of build up, not so much as for the health piece, but just for the climate awareness. But I was also thinking when you said about schools, there's, the huge push to get kids outdoors, in outdoor spaces and into the nature and the environment. So that's another sort of tangentially related health piece, in that there's just the health of getting fresh air, being part of green spaces, and that whole push, which is very COVID friendly and important for COVID, but just important for student health and well-being. And then the flip side of that is, our green spaces are sort of in jeopardy, through things like, California's severe drought right now, and all the wildfires we're having that are, devastating a lot of our open spaces. I'm leading a set of hikes up at my old workplace as part of their First Friday. It's their family Friday initiative, and we're going to get out into the Redwood Forest and do these, because it's right adjacent to the old science center I worked at. It's such a great opportunity to pair sort of what NASA does. Jim and I talked about this when Jim was volunteering at Chabot years ago, that NASA does so much, and NOAA, of course, to monitor Earth and the home planet, and through remote sensing and understanding what's happening here. So I talked to someone from a group called Save the Redwood League yesterday, and we're going to meet up, but they do a lot with climate change and looking at what is the future of the Redwoods, both from the standpoint of a changing climate environment, but also from the standpoint of using it as a tool for climate mitigation. They sequester so much carbon. They're huge. They're the biggest trees, tallest trees in the world, right? So I'm looking forward to pairing these hikes with that climate awareness piece this Friday, just to kind of emphasize how much NASA and NOAA are doing in this space that's kind of undervalued, I think, and unknown. What I'd heard is that there's more, NASA looks more at planet Earth than any other planet, out there, even though we think of NASA as space-based and, exploring other planets and astronomy and all of that. So anyway, but the paired that, just coming back to the public health piece, just getting folks outside, understanding the importance of nature, what's at risk because of climate change and those natural spaces, I think is another piece of the conversation.
Jim, you want to add on to that?
Sure. So this is both on what Eric was greatly saying and Melissa. Coming from the so both climate and health and tools and educational tools and opportunities. The fact that we do pay attention to carbon dioxide is such a great tie-in to health. Not only the effects of the greenhouse effect and how you that we don't feel right. It actually makes us sick if we have too much carbon dioxide there, but that's a whole kind of a different level than the 300 parts per million type of thing and the levels where you start to really not feeling well. But I mean, and then there's the question of instruments. So one is the demonstrations that are easy to do with ocean acidification. And Eric, I'd be glad to get you some kits out there if you want, just because now that people can breathe again, literally into things, you know, that we've really refined that bromothymol blue based stuff that we've been doing, you know, for 20 years. I mean, you know, but that gets into that can tie into all kinds of medical things that let people medical, because like there's the question of you're doing a demonstration of how human breath with carbon dioxide will make the water turn from blue to yellow. So demonstration ocean acidification. So you can go the ocean acidification angle, but then it has the thing of why do we breathe? We breathe to get oxygen in, but we also breathe to get carbon dioxide out, and you get sick very quickly. And you can see that your blood is turning to acid very quickly if you don't get rid of carbon dioxide. The demonstration about ocean acidification is also a great health connection, and it's valid science. It can connect. There's there's opportunities for partnerships that, oh, you're also teaching about health out there on the Redwoods, and or in the place that you're looking at and so on. So that's strong. On the building CO2 monitors, certainly in California, a lot of places they're almost a standard issue now in buildings of it's seeing how well the system's doing. It's even a way to tell like how many people are in the building, how many people are in a large room. There's an occupant sensors because the CO2 levels are going up a lot. So that's equipment that's out there, and things that you could. It's an opportunity to use. Now, when I would recommend as an educator doing hands-on science, be aware of how prevalent the CO2 monitors are. That they're everywhere. They're not terribly expensive. I would recommend if you want to do any demonstrations, though, you can go just straight to the educational ones. So there's Pasco, Veneer, and Pocket Lab. Those are the big three. They have CO2 sensors. We just find that they're better for demos than trying to adapt the building ones. There's factors about them that the building ones aren't so good at. But in a pinch, you can still go over and breathe on the building ones. Yeah, it's a great subject, and there we tied in with the national. That got the interest of the National Institute of Health, that our students can teach about health and climate change education in exciting ways. So thank you. It's good to be working with similar folks.
That sounds cool. I wish I had some of those right now. I have a STEM fair coming up, and I'm so burnt out of doing the same. Of course, I haven't even done it for 2 years, but I usually take a groundwater model and do a whole water cycle, water resource, water filter unit, and I'm just so tired of it. I want to do something else.
Well, Ginger, I don't want to be a salesman of things, but the ocean acidification demos, those are really easy. I mean, excuse me, in terms of the investment, you can have some kits literally for $5 each that you can do a number of demonstrations, and then you just have to refill and we can share them too. Is bromothymol blue costs a bit to get a big bottle of it, but a big bottle goes a long, long way, and you can share it with a lot of people. So.
I've been trying to think about this has been a big interest of mine, and I've been trying to think about how clean can get more into the health side of things too. It's I do believe we have some resources in our collection about health, but I also feel like I'm doing a sales pitch, but one of the more exciting things we're doing too is we have a special webinar on April 19th about climate change and mental health for students. And well, the webinar is for teachers, but kind of just like managing burnout and that type of thing. One of my colleagues, Alicia, who does some work with Clean, she's been doing tons and tons of research about how to emotionally support students through climate change, and we're gonna release a teaching guidance page on how to kind of work through that. And Clean as you may know, is supported by Ceres and CU Boulder. And in Boulder this year, they had really, really terrible wildfires, and it kind of got very real very quickly as we've been discussing that among our staff, just because teachers are kind of grappling with how to deal with the mental health of students. And it's true, I don't really think about, I think I should do a better job of thinking about mental health being a very core aspect of that climate change and health, that whole side of things. And that's just such a big issue in climate. It's the increased natural disasters is something I think that a lot of these climate and health organizations are focusing a lot on. So I don't know. I'm all, if anyone ever has any suggestions about what things to do to incorporate
I want
that
to
more.
build. I want to build on that, just saying, as we've said on previous calls, of course, it's not just the students, it's the teachers and the people that live in climate science and climate ed all the time too. And I mean, it's affecting our mental health every day in a variety of ways as we try to go about our lives. And the release of the new reports that just confirm what we knew was coming. It's brutal right now. Like trying to do my day job involves this. My day job involves educating others to be more informed, which means they carry this load with them. But it comes right down to daily things like, should I plan a vacation knowing that I have to fly on an airplane that is a choice that introduces CO2 to the world? Or should I no longer fly? Where am I at am I going to give up traveling by plane the last third of my life? And camping in Colorado is no longer a viable alternative for the second half of the summer, because you will be living out anywhere in the West. You'll be living outside, most likely in fire smoke, breathing outside with no ability to get out of it. Your home is bad enough, but a tent's bad. I mean, it's every single day. And these are things affecting real humans, including those of us on the call, as we think about planning our futures. So mental health is not just for students, it's all of us.
Totally.
That's why I'm here, because I come see you guys. It makes me feel better.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point. I think the page that Elisha is creating has resources for both students and teachers, which will be good. But I'm excited for that to be published soon, because I think we all really need, I don't know. I feel like everyone's struggling right now with the state of the world. So these are good conversations to have. Jim.
Sure. Thank you, Gina. One thing I would think we as a community can do when folks are checking with us from the mental health side of the health industry, that are often addressing the problem and the diagnosis and speaking of hope and speaking of despair, and very important, is we generally have access to information that they don't, that they need, which includes, you want concrete examples of what students are doing to take action. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard a serious talk about the problem without there's a number of things we can do, but the most important things that people need something they can do that's meaningful, that is doing things, and they need examples and so on. So it's kind of sharing those examples or having those available. And one is, I would definitely call out to Jen, with all your incredible youth climate summits and activities. What are examples of what the students are doing, and many different types, so people can pick the kind of different things we have. I think we each can share inspiring, uplifting examples that at least as you can do what you can do each, and that's a huge thing. I mean, I can think of just the attitude of our students when they're taking action is so much. It's not despair. I mean, we all have that. We all are dealing with that. But I mean, again, not to go too much into it, but I mean, the folks in Ukraine, they can't just sit around and mope, right? They're taking action for not just themselves, but people all around the world. And some of us will do that. Naturally the kids and other folks have to be refugees. I mean, there's so many things that people have to do, but some of us are taking action, and that's very inspiring. So anyway, it's a service that Clean can provide. Like, so what are some examples of taking action?
Yeah, I feel like it relates to the conversation from last week and we've had a lot over the weeks that Ankar Shah kind of brought to the front, which was, changing the paradigm of how we approach youth with this topic. So, and action is at the core of that, but also I think it was California Coastal Commission just put out a grant RFP around students submitting kind of positive visions for the future. So really encouraging students to imagine the world that they want and then create that world through action, or to envision it, to truly envision it, and to not. And again, it's not about sugarcoating the real data and the changes that we're seeing that NASA know are collecting, and we know that these changes are coming, and there's so much that's built in because of the inertia and the PPMs that are already there. So we know there's change coming, and we know there's going to be more change, but that doesn't mean that the world ends, but it means it gets harder, it gets tougher, but there are opportunities for youth. And I think a lot about, Wendy, what you were saying too, like, how much do I travel? I love to travel. I still have sort of this huge bucket list. The short list is all these climate zones that are like ours that I'm fascinated by, that I want to go visit. I just want to see those in my life. But it's, how do we measure that, balance that with my own carbon footprint? But I think we each have to navigate that personally, right? We have to, I can eat less meat. I can, whenever I walk to the grocery store instead of take a car, there's so many personal things that we can do. Plus then, again, referencing former conversations about education and the amplification that does for carbon footprints reduction, and being able to quantify that, where each of us are in that space and making a huge difference there. So I don't know, it's tough, because otherwise we're all living like Zen monks, right? We're on the hill and we're, not moving, budging.
The personal action thing, the reason I brought that up was real life examples of there's no escape, which is why it weighs heavily, which is why there's a mental health issue. And then weighing, well, how many, if I skip how many beef meals, does that equal flying to Hawaii? And like your brain, you can just explode, right? With personal choice. And then you realize from other very good conversations and sessions we've had as part of Clean, that individual action relative to corporate action and taking civic action is like the two dwarf each other, right? So if your personal action almost adds up to nothing, and you should be putting all your energy into those other places, then how do you meaningfully do that? And again, back to the mental health aspect of not being crippled, taking care of yourself, not giving up. It's a daunting place. And we're the professionals that are thinking about a lot of this all the time, and it's still that daunting. So then what does that mean for the everyday citizens, whether they're youth, public, adults, that we are trying to educate about the problem? How is it more or less daunting, or the training we need to be with them in that moment when it all gets very real for them? So hang on, sorry.
One thing I could bring in that ties some of this together, I think, is when we're looking at people being depressed and feeling that they can't do anything and that there's nothing happening, that Congress is stuck and the corporations aren't doing changes enough, and so on. We're encountering some of the biggest corporations in the world are actively making that happen. They do it on many levels. They do it on that it's too late, you can't do anything. But it comes down to really what we're doing. I mean, we have had our students to be featured in major books, and our students are taking action to be featured in very big ways to highlight what they're doing. And then we find out that the largest petroleum industries are actively working to suppress that. They're going and offering money. They're giving power to the people who produce these books. You are not to have this child in this book. This will not feature this person. There's arguments that are made, but are basically, we control you. And it was very important to them to not have high school students who are taking action on climate change being featured as people who can take action on energy. We need to have it be dominated by us. The people who are going to be represented work for us. We are energy. There's nothing going on. Thing is, if you get out there and you start challenging this stuff, then you have to see, what do, right? Do you take the money and you quiet down? Never been us. But also, what we're also learning is the way so much of education, including books and things, are structured is they come in and they offer money and they offer power, but there's a stipulation is you may not talk about this. You can't talk about what we have asked you to do. You can't talk about our influence. That's something we're encountering right now too, is the petroleum industry is able to keep quiet that they dominate what we do. I don't think that's a good idea.
I missed the lead into that due to the disruptive phone call I received, but listening to the end of it doesn't make me feel better, Jim.
Well, okay, but I mean, I guess there's also is realizing there's talking to our different audiences, and each of us has to deal with things. I want the emotional support for everybody. We're going to do things. We have to make our personal choices. There are some of us who are actively working for action on students and doing things. We're encountering, we're being attacked, and that's so. I mean, that's what some of us are going to do. We're going to have to keep. The kids are having to fight for their voice of being suppressed that they have. And it's, see, I mean, when you get the story, it's very uplifting. You see why they had to smash it. To saying, one of the arguments that they make, to give us some rationale, like Putin will give a rationale that he's being attacked, so he has to attack back. There's some crazy rationale that's given, is what you're doing will never scale. It will never take off. It won't ever do anything. And what they're saying is, millions of young people of color will not take action on climate change. They're just saying that this can never be in the schools, that we can do things. When you actually see the story, our students are being asked to meet with the director of the National Museum of Natural History, one of the biggest, most prestigious museums in the country, Smithsonian, to talk about how they can go through the museum and locate where they're wasting energy in ways that their staff are not able to. And it's a wonderful, we have to tell the kids, don't worry. That with the kids are worried that when they talk about it, they should sugarcoat it because the people will be insulted that we're finding flaws. And having to assure them, I've talked with them, don't worry. We all want to correct these flaws. We're not going to embarrass them. We're there to do that. But I mean, think how uplifting that is. Middle school students are helping giant federal agencies take action on climate change. And then you see the pictures of it. I can only do so much, but that's one contribution I think we're going to try and make. So, but what I'd ask of you all is maybe don't have to do all that, but maybe it's like the folks of Ukraine. We're not asking everybody to go to Ukraine or send missiles or do everything, but support and speak out, and don't let what's happening be suppressed, and to tell the truth. I would ask people to show a little bit of outrage that students who are taking action on climate change are being shut up by the petroleum industry. It's not, they shouldn't have a word in it. Why do they have any right to determine what children's books say about climate change and energy, to the point that they're suppressing children? I don't think we should stay quiet on that.
Well, same thing in the school boards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if the school boards are not wanting to include it in curriculum or trying to shut down teachers, the parents and families and community need to get out there. I'm going to pop some things in the chat. I don't know if you guys have heard the term climate shadow. as opposed to climate footprint. And there was a good article a couple weeks ago that I saw. And so I don't know if I told you guys, Billie Eilish is my first cousin once removed. And I know that it weighs on the family, the carbon footprint of touring. But they have a whole eco village set up, and they don't sell bottled water at events and encourage people to bring a water bottle and all these things. And I sent this article to Maggie, her mom, to, because it's just like, I think the education that you're doing at your venues and at concerts, hopefully this carbon shadow is bigger than your carbon footprint in the multiplication fact. And then the first link is called Purple Mountain Films. And it's Jeremy Jones, who's a world-class snowboarder and has made a living flying all over the world doing snowboard films. And he is trying to figure out, how does he maintain his lifestyle as he's watching it literally melt away. And it's just a really wonderful and compelling movie that, again, it sort of makes me feel hopeful because, what's his shadow in a totally different market than most people would think of advertising to.
Seems like a fairly positive ending place.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I was just looking at the article that you put in the chat, Ginger, so I was a little distracted reading that. But thanks everyone for a good conversation, and they're always good discussions to have. But yeah, be well, and thank you all, and we'll see you next week or whenever you're able to join again. Thank you.
Hi. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone. Thanks, Ginger, for hosting. I'm sorry, Gina.
Gina.
All good. G name.
Happens all the
good.
time.
G. Bye.
Bye.